Good afternoon, everybody. How are we all doing? Shall I say hello, Leeds? Pretend I'm at the Leeds Festival. So thank you all so much for coming down and coming to our second ever Leeds campus Northcoders graduation. We're really excited to have you here. And we've got 4 fabulous teams presenting 4 amazing projects to present to you in a moment. So yeah, the 18 people that graduate today take us up to 433 Northcoders graduated in just over 3 years. So that number just keeps growing, and I'm starting to struggle to keep up. And I think has had the joke the other week when during our summer party she announced we'd done 404, which actual number rather than made up, but there you go. So anyway, in case you're wondering why I'm talking into a microphone and there is no amplification, that's because we are live on the internet. So we have hiring partners streaming in and people from the Manchester campus streaming in. So I'm just going to run through the format of what's going to happen. Before I do that, I should probably do the house announcements. There are no scheduled planned fire alarms, so if there is one of those, please just follow the green signs and down the stairs that are opposite the lifts, which is also where you'll find the bathrooms if you need to go. Right, that's that done. So what's going to happen is we're going to have 4 teams presenting, about sort of 10 to 15 minutes each of the presentation, and then there'll be the opportunity to ask questions after each team. And if you're on the internet, you can ask questions on the box below, so just type them in and we'll get those questions asked as well. And then once we've finished, we will go back into our campus, our classroom, for some drinks and a chance to meet the students, the graduates I should say, and then I believe we're going to the Water Lane Boathouse, is that correct? Is that where we're going? After about sort of just before 6 for some drinks and some pizza. So without further ado, I would like to announce our first team called Art.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Chloe, and I'm here with Ian, Kaitan, Luke, and Simon, and we're going to present our project, which is called Art. So Art is a new platform for local artists in the area to gain exposure and showcase their work. So we've used the latest AR technology to allow artists to digitally render or paint their work onto walls around Leeds. So when we were kind of coming up with ideas for our project, we really wanted to do something that was going to be challenging for us. We wanted to use new technologies that we hadn't necessarily learnt during our time at Northcoders, but ultimately we wanted to do something that was going to be fun for us as a group to work on together. So we worked with a couple of local artists for this, who provided us with some images that you will see during some of our demos. So we've created an app that we would use ourselves, and we could see actually being something that could be used around Leeds or other cities, for people to go and explore and see a little bit more of their local community. So when we initially scoped our project, we were focused on the AR functionality. That was going to be the target for our MVP. However, kind of as we went through the 10 days or so that we had, we exceeded our goals, and we managed to complete also a web front end too. So that gives us kind of a full end-to-end experience for artists and for users. So the screen shows you an overview of what we've done for our project. So we've actually got 2 front ends. One's a native Android app, the other is a web app. And then we've also got a back end that kind of serves either of those to be able to host and hold all of the information about the artists and their images. We used a whole host of new technology that the rest of the team will talk about in a minute. I am super proud of what we've achieved in the kind of last 2 weeks. So yeah, without further ado, I will pass you on to Kaitan, who's going to talk through the web front end.
Thank you, Chloe. All right, hello everyone. So this is our artist front end. So this is basically one of the front ends which we created using React. We've got Apollo there as well to retrieve data, query data from our database. So we would That's fine. Right, okay, so as an artist, you can log in. This will go through an authentication procedure. Once the artist is in, they'll be able to see array of walls which they can select. Now, these walls will have dimensions on them and will show a picture on the left-hand side for artists to actually download, and they can start working on them. So they will then choose the file that they want, and they will upload this. Once uploaded, they can submit this, and they'll receive a nice message saying it's been submitted. This will then go into our Firebase storage and also fall into our backend database. With this, as the guys will show later on, you will see when you go to the wall, the picture will appear. I will now pass you on to Luke, who will speak to you about our backend.
Thank you very much, Keitan. Okay, so yeah, I just want to tell you a little bit about the back end. I'm not going to spend much time saying kind of what it does. It serves data to the front end to allow it to do its job. So we just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the tech choices that we made. So the first choice we made was whether to do a NoSQL non-relational database or a relational database. At first, we thought that our data needs were going to be fairly slim, so we didn't think that we would actually necessarily need a relational database. But after a bit of spiking and mapping out our data needs, we kind of figured out that even though we've only got a few different data types, we actually have more relations than we thought we did, so it's a bit more complex. So we went for a relational database. As you can see on there, we hoped at some point to add comments in as well, so having a relational database would make that easier further down the line. So we wanted to explore a few different options. We'd done a REST API before, which would have been a good option, but we just wanted to see what else was out there, and we eventually settled on GraphQL as a good option. One reason for this is because it seems to be gaining a lot of popularity, a lot of traction, and so we thought it'd be good to just use something really cutting edge. It also has got a lot of advantages. So instead of defining a different endpoint for every single different data type that you've just got one endpoint, and all your data queries go to that one endpoint. There's no routing as a result of that, or no necessary need for a router, and you don't need as much in terms of models and controllers. So we define a strongly typed schema, and we define some resolver functions which tell the which define how that information comes back. One really strong feature of it as well is that as we're going along, there's a tool called Graphical, which we can use with it, which provides almost like a mock front end, a little bit like when you're developing something in React, you can see things on a locally hosted front end. We've got something similar with GraphQL, so all the way through we could mock data request and see exactly what our queries would produce. And it meant that the front end could actually define the data queries that they wanted, and we could work with those from the back end. So even though we were working alongside each other, well, separately rather, we could coordinate really well doing that. Another benefit is that there's really low traffic on the server, because if there's only one endpoint, and even if you've got a nested query or something with lots of information from lots of tables, you've only got one query going to the server instead of several different ones which then get joined together. For an app this size, possibly the benefits aren't that noticeable, but we feel it's been a really good choice, because if we were to scale this up to a production level app, then these benefits will be more manifest. Okay, so I just want to pass you over to Ian.
Hi everyone. Okay, so like we mentioned earlier, we wanted to make an app that was fun to use, that helps local artists get their work seen. So it was important for the mobile app to be approachable and easy to get to grips with as well. So provided clean interface for the app. We've used Google's material, design components, and general philosophy. It's something that most users will be familiar with. It also lends itself really well to scaling up, like Luke mentioned. If we do want to add further features, there's obvious ways to do it using this design philosophy. In terms of spiking, most of the initial spiking revolved around Google's Flutter. Vero, React Native were also explored as options. These frameworks, they all offer like the promise of compatibility with AR Core, which is what we decided on for the AR being the best tech choice for the solution that we needed. Also, they offer the ability to compile native code for both iOS and Android, which was quite desirable. However, there were a number of question marks over using these choices, generally relating around their sort of relative infancy. They're quite new. We'd be relying on multiple dependencies across two very distinct OSes, and also we'd be relying on third-party plugins, which are yet to reach version 1. So, given the short lead time, we decided to just create a native Java app for Android. Targeting one device at launch meant the app would be available for fewer devices, but it does give a better quality of AR experience, which we deem to be the most important thing, and also it helped to reduce unnecessary risks in relating to delivering our MVP. Java. Any fans of Java in the house? Okay, so learning Java in a matter of days was quite daunting. I'd not even declared my first Hello World when we started this project. So despite that, I'm 100% happy with the decision we made. I think it really helped to deliver the sort of quality of app that we wanted to. And also as well, it's given us confidence to just go and work with any tech stack that we feel is appropriate to the project we're doing, rather than trying to make something fit in with what knowledge we already have. Going to pass over to Simon now. He's going to talk through some of the. You might want to see the app, I suppose. Okay, so this is the map component. Piggybacks off the Google Maps API. You can see it provides not just information about where you're going, but also a bit more detail about the wall that you need to look for. This is Keitan slowly making his way past Red's True Barbecue. This did need to be edited down for that reason. Arriving at a location, you have in the corner here the marker that you need to look out for. Obviously, as you approach, GPS picks up that you're in the right location. The marker's recognised and the art is augmented onto the wall. We've got left and right arrows on the screen, so you can cycle through the different artworks available at each location, as we're doing now and sort of pretending to look at quite badly. Another location here. You've got the same thing, but this demo was showing the ability, if you now click on the images, now shows you the artist and also the name of the piece of art as well. So now I will hand you over to Simon to discuss the tech a bit more.
Thanks, Ian. Right, as Ian already explained, we chose AR Core because we found that it had the best performance. Specifically, what we liked about it was that it had really fast surface and image detection, stable tracking, good support for autofocus, and it integrated seamlessly with the Sceneform SDK, which is what we use for the actual rendering of the art. And it led us to develop the augmented reality activity of our application in a flow that can be visualized a bit like this. It starts by getting the user's location, and then from that it finds the wall that's closest to them. And for any seafarers in the room, we did use the Haversine formula, not the cosine, because it's more accurate at small distances. And once it has the closest wall, it gets the data that relates to that wall, including the images. It downloads the images from the Firebase storage asynchronously while loading the AR fragment, which also displays, as Ian mentioned, the marker that the user should look for in the corner. And so by the time they've found the wall, hopefully a few seconds have passed, and it should be ready to augment the image as soon as they point the phone at it. And then they can flick through without any loading time. I'll now pass you over to Keitan, who's going to talk about the challenges we overcame.
Thank you, Simon. So with anything, you're going to get challenges, especially doing an app in 2 weeks. You're going to come across a lot of challenges, and it's how you overcome them. So the first one we had was identifying most appropriate tech. This was done over a few days spiking session just to eliminate what we thought wouldn't be the appropriate tech for our app. I'm sure some of the technology would be useful, but for our app, we chose the technology we did, removing things like Flutter and React Native and going with Android SDK as it was the more native option for AR Core. Working with new languages, these guys on the front end learning Java, learnt Java to a state whereby they're working with the Google Map API and they're bringing in all this data. It was tough, done in again within 2 weeks, amazing. On the back end, we used GraphQL querying technology, which we haven't used before, yet we still cracked on, we got it, and there was a high five moment on a Friday when we started talking to each other with the back end and front end, which was pretty good. Limited support for more recent tech. So with GraphQL and AR Core, there are new technologies. They're really big. They are getting a lot of, what can I say, they're popular now. Therefore, some of the information we required for our app wasn't online to look for. So we had to basically search what we needed and try and make what we wanted to do in our app, try to make it for that. And again, testing and deploying data in production. So this was how we hosted our database. We hosted it on Heroku, and we had a production live API database, which the front end guys were talking to. However, there were changes that we needed to make, and this wasn't feasible by just changing it while they're working on the front end. So we had to create a staging environment on Heroku. We created the staging environment where we'll test our changes. Once they're on, we'll push it up and speak to the front end guys to make sure everything was working fine. Right, I'm going to pass you back to Chloe now to talk about the future of Art Leeds.
Yeah, so just to finish up, if we had more time, more resources, there are loads of things that we left on the backlog of our Kanban board. I'm not going to talk through all of them now, but a couple of highlights being social integration. We would want artists to be able to kind of put the word out there. They've uploaded a new piece of art onto a wall. We'd want users to also be able to share their experiences of using our app. We've talked about this before, but also having iOS compatibility and being able to use it across all the devices and as many users as possible. So yeah, there's loads of things that we would want to do and take this forward to put it into production. So actually at the moment we have submitted our app for review for Google. So hopefully this time next week we will actually have a app in the Play Store, which is amazing, something that I never thought I'd hear myself say. So yeah, that is our project. Thank you all for listening. Yeah, if you've got any questions. I feel like I'm left with them.
Absolutely amazing. Just, yeah, doing all of that in 2 weeks, learning all those new technologies and making it look as slick. And, yeah, let's see if it's coming to your a handheld device near you. So, who wants to ask the first question in the room? Please don't be shy. That is a resounding.
Yeah, it was
They
that
answered
good.
all of your questions. Come on. Yes, thank you. Max.
Yeah, damn it.
So I'm interested in the Java app talking to your backend APIs. So you use GraphQL. We've just been doing something very similar, and we've had some difficulties with the Java support for GraphQL, especially Apollo. Just wondering how you found it, what you did, and yeah, what you used.
Yeah, we also used Apollo as kind of the client to help us talk with the backend. So I built the map functionality, which kind of hosted the markers. It was, like I say, the documentation was pretty limited. We did have difficulties, but that was our high five moment. I think, yeah, there were a couple of Stack Overflow came to the rescue, basically. Yeah, so once we got that cracked, we could then use that for the AR fragment as well. So yeah, I don't know whether, Simon, you've got anything to add.
Yes, I also used Apollo client in the augmented reality activity of the app and also found it quite good. It would be using the various types of asynchronicity at the same time was a little bit challenging, but I was pretty impressed by the Apollo client itself. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Max. Thanks, guys. Who's next? Now Max has broken the ice. Anyone else want to ask a question of Team Art? Shall I consult what's happening online, see if there's any online questions going on? No? Are we really going to let them off the hook that easily?
Yeah, that's
thank you, James.
So I don't develop anymore, but when I was, one of the banes of my existence was Android app development, and partially it's Java because it's just a pain. How about the non-coding process of that? How long did it take you just to get something to build in the damn IDE and Gradle, Maven, all of that sort of fun stuff?
Yeah, that was. Do you want to answer that?
I don't know if I should be allowed to talk about Gradle.
As far as I know.
Yeah, I would agree, that's the frustration with Android SDK, particularly when you're running things in an emulator for testing. It's not the most, it has its quirks. I don't think it's really, there's a lot of things that I did like about it once I got to use it, but when we looked at Flutter as well, and React Native, Gradle was a problem there. So it
allegedly saves time.
Yeah, but it's not just Android Studio, and there are nice things about it. The XML stuff's really easy to use, and it gives good errors. Yeah, so at least you know where you've gone wrong. Yeah. Anyone else?
Just a quick follow-up to that one. So, based on your experience with GraphQL, and obviously presumably on the course you were learning about REST as well, do you think that GraphQL can be like a complete replacement for sort of REST if you were starting a new project now, or is it something to go alongside it?
I mean, that's a pretty big question. Oh, sorry. That's a fairly big question. I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer it, but from a lot of the reading that we did when we were spiking it out, it's not going to replace it completely. Most people think that it's a really strong option for the future and it's going to be used a lot more, but there's still going to be places for REST APIs. So yeah, I think we'll see it a lot more in the future. And there's a lot of big companies that are using it. I wish I could list them off the top of my head, but Twitter, I think, are using it still. Yeah. Sorry? GitHub are using it, so that's a pretty good endorsement. So yeah, I think we'll be seeing more of it, but it's not going to replace REST APIs altogether.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Fantastic. Hold on, Chris. Stick to protocol. You got, yeah.
Quite loud. So. Hello. I also just want to extend the congratulations because it's the first ever app at Northcoders on the App Store. So I've got a microphone and you can't hear me.
Sorry,
cool. What was obviously 5 people? Yeah. So you've obviously going through Northcoders. It's the first time that you've
so having an uneven number did mean that there was kind of maybe one person that just had to tag onto another group. I actually felt like it split quite naturally into kind of back end and front end, and then the front end had 3 different activities that we built through Java, so again that could then get split up. So we do more solo coding, but then peer reviews when we committed the code. So it wasn't always kind of 2 sat with each other on one computer. It was kind of actually doing the coding yourself, coming together to review it as a team, and then pushing it through to kind of the various branches on GitHub.
One thing we found helpful is right at the very beginning we set up a organization on GitHub which allowed us to have 3 separate repos, 1 back end, 2 front end, but keep a project which covered them all and allowed us to keep track of the issues in all 3 of them together in one place. So that helped with coordination. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I think let's bring this one to a close and just one final congratulations to Art. So if you bear with us just one moment while we swap teams. Right, welcome back, everybody. I'm sorry that the room is not as cool as it can be. I believe we've got it on the lowest setting possible. Just before I introduce the next team, if you are happening to use social media, then our hashtag for today is hashtag NCGrad. And without further ado, let me introduce you to MediRep.
Afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming. My name's Rich, and welcome to our presentation for MediRep. I'll give you a quick intro of the team. Tom, Alex, Alice, and Laura currently DJing for us. About 10 years ago, my father-in-law was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and latterly with Parkinson's dementia. One of the key bits of advice that you're given when you're first diagnosed, that you must keep a detailed diary of things like symptoms, how well you take medication, water intake, things like that. And the other one is that you absolutely must take your pills on time. So the reason for the detailed diary is that your consultancy appointments are often 6 months or more apart. So obviously it's difficult to remember all of that in the back of your mind when you go to an appointment. Secondly, it's vital that you keep a steady level of dopamine in your bloodstream, hence why you have to take the pills on time. So in the initial stages of the illness, it's obviously quite easy for someone to carry out those things for themselves, but as the symptoms progress and your condition deteriorates, those become more and more problematic. So what we wanted to do was create an app that eased the burden on patients and carers in terms of primarily for the diary, but also for the day-to-day reminders of medication. So in order to maintain the accessibility for patients as they became more ill, we chose Alexa as the primary interface because obviously you don't need to use it in a physical sense. And we also had a mobile app as a secondary interface with the app in addition to an overview function. So I'll pass you over to Alice. She's going to give you a quick demonstration of the app at work.
Thank you. Hello. So the first thing you do when you open up the app is you see this screen. So you get to log in or sign up. And then once you've signed in or logged in for the first time, you have to pair Alexa to get everything talking to each other. Next slide. Thanks. Yeah, I'll let Alexa do the talking on this bit.
It looks like there is no app paired with this device. Please say pair a device to pair an app.
Pair a device.
What is your pair device code?
2085.
Pairing successful.
Okay, so this pairing screen loads a brand new random 4-digit code every single time, which is needed in order to make sure that the right Alexa is talking to the right app. Okay, so our next bit of functionality is sort of being able to track your symptoms. Alexa sends a reminder every day at 3 p.m, take a quiz. And this is what happens.
Alexa, open MediRep.
What would you like me to do?
Take a quiz.
On a scale of 1 to 5, how is your mood today?
1.
On a scale of 1 to 5, how stiff do you feel today?
2.
On a scale of 1 to 5, how slow do you feel today?
3.
On a scale of 1 to 5, how are your tremors today?
4.
Your answers have been recorded.
Okay, so you can see the results of all the quizzes and you can scroll through right through your history on the app. And then we get to medications. So through the app, you can add a new medication reminder. You can also mark them as taken. So if you happen to be out and about and you still want to receive notifications, you get a push notification, and then through the app, you can mark it as taken. So Alexa doesn't keep bothering you or anybody else who happens to be linked to your account. You can also delete the medication reminders through the app, but this doesn't delete them from the database. That's so that users can look back through their history and see when they started and stopped taking different types of medication. And then through Alexa,
Here's your reminder from MediRep Alexa. It's time to take your sertraline. Don't forget to log that you've taken these. Say open MediRep and then, I've taken my meds.
Open MediRep.
What would you like me to do?
I've taken my medication.
Your medication Copenhagen was successfully recorded as taken.
Okay, and then finally, the last two little bits that we've got on our app are an events page. So that's for things that aren't necessarily on a day-to-day basis. You can't plan for them. So for people with Parkinson's, it might be something like falling over or freezing, that sort of thing. So there's a way to view and record those on the app. And then we have an overview so you can track any changes over time. Okay, so now I'm going to pass over to Alex to talk to you a little bit more about our tech.
We were able to use push notifications. We wanted to make sure that we were able to use push notifications and also to have more than one person be able to access and interact with the data. So as well as the primary user, who would be the person suffering from the condition, they might have a family member or a nominated care provider who is able to see all the same alerts and add to the data that's being collected. We also used Expo alongside of React Native because when we were spiking out making the push notifications work, this is one of the packages that worked very nicely with what we already had in place. The second front-end interface is the Alexa skill that you've just seen demonstrated. We looked at Alexa, Google Home, and the possibility of putting something together with a Raspberry Pi. We settled on Alexa because the documentation was very good, and we found that quite easy to follow, and we got off the ground relatively quickly during spiking with that. The Alexa aspect of this product is really, really important because, as Rich was saying, by their nature, these sorts of conditions are degenerative, and that means that using an app is just not sustainable in the long term. We want someone to be able to continue to make use of this, even if they're not able to use a mobile phone or a computer. Lastly, for the back end, we decided, given the constraint of 2 weeks to finish everything, taking on a third new technology was probably not a good idea, so we stuck with something that we've used before, which is Node and Express with a Postgres database. That being said, there were a couple of additional challenges. For instance, previously we'd only made purely RESTful APIs. This one isn't. It does take proactive steps. It keeps re-examining itself, and it decides when it's time to send out these push notifications and declare that something is overdue or etc. And at that point, I'm going to hand over to Tom to talk about some of the challenges we faced.
Thanks, Alex. So we wanted push notifications for this, and it turns out they're more difficult than we thought they were when we set out. So they need their own infrastructure to get going, and our choices were we write our own or we use an existing framework. We found that in Expo. So we use Expo's framework to make push notifications get going. Our other challenges, we have 3 systems involved, 3 very different systems, 2 of which we'd never worked with before. And it was getting them to talk to each other in the way we wanted them to work, to have our work the way we needed it to, was, well, the challenge. So we did this through proper stand-ups and communications and proper handovers of when we change technologies. Next, Amazon Alexa, we didn't have total control over this system. We are limited by what Amazon gives us to work with. So we had to alter our functionality from what we imagined it at the start to fit what we're able to do within Amazon's system. For example, we wanted Alexa to be able to wake up and quiz our user. However, Alexa can't wake herself up and have a 2-way conversation. All she can do is send a reminder. We found that the voice inputs had to be limited to a certain type. For example, when you speak to her, you have to say a number or a name. has to be a predefined set. This is a restriction once again set by Amazon. And also Alexa doesn't have very great error messages. I spent an hour or more chasing down an unknown error, which turns out was because my user hadn't set permissions to receive reminders, but I don't know why that couldn't have been in an error. So we solved these problems partly by attrition and partly by the documentation for Alexa, which is actually very good. So we had a bit of issue with the handover because we all wanted a bit of each of the systems in this. And early on, we just moved around. I mean, being an odd-numbered team, we'd often have one person in one system and then move them around. But as I said earlier, we had dedicated handovers where we sat down and talked about how we were doing this. And that really taught us the value of a proper handover. Right, I'll pass you on to Laura, who's going to talk to us about...
We've learnt. So I'm just going to quickly cover off what we've learnt. So I'll start with the obvious. We learnt some new technology. So we learned Alexa, AWS, and React Native. As a group, we were really impressed with Alexa. We had some initial concerns about Amazon's ring fencing around what we could do. But I think it worked really well in the end. It was a really good experience as well to code within a sort of a set environment and it's good practice going forward. Restless servers, Alex touched on this, but we're really proud of it, so I'm going to mention it again. So we've only really worked with RESTful servers before, but we were able to get our servers to respond without a direct call, which was really good. Version control. So we've been through Northcoders and sort of thought version control was sort of waxing lyrical, but it's actually invaluable. It's the best thing ever. So one change we would make going forward, though, is we originally set up our project in 3 repositories. So we had front end, back end, and Alexa. I think if we were to go forward and have the knowledge we have now, we'd set that up in one. I think it'd really help in terms of working as a group, tracking where we were, any issues that came up. Spiking. Spiking was invaluable to this project, particularly with Alexa. So it allowed us to really understand the limitations, and it allowed us to make those adjustments very early on in the project phase, rather than getting a week in and having to change everything over. Finally, the importance of project scope. So this project is pretty emotive to a few of us. It was really easy to get carried away about things that would be really good for a patient or a caregiver and want to add these new features. So it was really important that we set the MVP at the start and we had somebody that reined us in. So yeah, that was fantastic, and we'll take that forward as well. So we're Team MediRep. Thank you for listening and to take any questions.
Thank you very much. What an amazingly emotive and brilliant use for a project. Well done. Absolutely amazing. So do we have some questions, please, from the room?
If you had your 2 weeks again, is there anything that you would do differently?
Good question. Pass it over. I'd do anything the same, so. Somebody else.
I think we'd probably do it largely the same, wouldn't we? I think the spiking gave us the different technologies that we wanted to use, and we were happy with them once we'd made the sorry, Tom. We'd made the choice, and I don't think we could have changed. I'm happy with the choices we made on the back end, because I don't think we probably had time to spike out another new technology and learn a different back end. So Alexa was our primary sort of sales piece. We definitely wanted her in, so the mobile app was something that we wanted in terms of giving a visual representation in terms of the data that we're capturing, and also the ability to have an overview of things that were going on, and you could delete and add certain things. So I think it was probably the minimum we could do, and I don't think I'd go back and choose anything else, subject to anyone else's view.
I'd agree with that.
I think the one thing that we definitely learned later on was the importance of a good handover. So if we'd known from the beginning just how important it was once 2 people had spent some time pairing on Alexa to then pass on absolutely everything you could in a good handover, I think we would have done that from the beginning. But that's something that we picked up during the process anyway. So yeah.
Any other questions in the room? No, I think you've done a brilliant job. We've got a thumbs up from Anthony at the distance, who thinks you've done a brilliant project. Hello, Anthony. Hope you're well. So if there's no more questions, let's have a final round of applause for MediRep.